Hello again. This was a stream session in which I painted in pixel art the character of Ciri from Witcher 3, and I painted it in the style of a fighter sprite. Um, Initially, I sketch out the shape. This is a 100 by 100 pixel image with an 80 by 80 sort of active area, and the reason was I wanted to make sure that I kept it in kind of this scale. It's big enough for details, but not too big that it takes me hours and hours to complete a piece. So I do a basic sketch, and I'm sketching at 100% scale, so I'm not sketching really big and then scaling down to fit the sprite. I want to get a sense of what detail I'll be able to put in. And now after I get a sketch, what I do is I redraw it, but I thicken it up. I make all the elements a little bit thicker so that they stand out better, so that it's not... Ciri's character is very tall and slim, so if I made that in real proportions, it would be a very thin silhouette on the screen. Now the next step is on a new layer, adding solid spots of color, so solid areas of color that match the color palette of the character. In this case, the linen cloth, the leather. There's 3 types of leather colors. One for the corset, one for the legs, and one for the boots. Legs and arms as well, as hands as well, or gloves in that case. And there's a few details that I don't add right away, but that I will gradually add. Now I did this in about an hour, 20 minutes. This was the longest stream I think I'd done. But in the end, I took like an extra 20 minutes maybe to clean things up a little bit and to change some of the decisions that I made. And the reason I did that part was that it would be very boring for people to be watching me just go over the drawing, figuring out what was wrong. Now, one of the problems with this portrait or with this image was actually the face. I wasn't able to get a face that looked, one that looked like the character itself, Ciri, and 2 that looked feminine. So I struggled with that for a bit, and then I just went off and fixed it on those extra 20 minutes that I put in the drawing afterwards. The technique of shading that I'm using is basically getting a different shade and filling in a new area of the drawing. Now notice what happens here with the leg. Just as soon as I put that extra color on the leg, you can really read the shape of the leg and how it's actually bending on the knee, because below the knee the color of the leg is completely different, meaning it gets a different light source, or at least it gets a different amount of light. That means it's not facing the light source the same as the top part. Now what's failing there is that the boot right next to it is shaded the same way as the boot on the right, which means that it's at the same angle, which is wrong, because it should be at the same angle as the shin, or the lower leg. And that's something that I also fix later on in those extra 20 minutes. Now I think that what I'm doing here is I'm sort of overshading some of the parts of the image. They're becoming really noisy because in a very small space I'm trying to put in all the shades that I have. And sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want to keep it, give it simplicity, because it increases the readability. When people look at the image, they will be able to read the volume straight away. If you give it a lot of noise, then it becomes, you don't know if you're putting shading, if you're putting texturing. So it's a bit more confusing. Now, for example, on the right arm, so her left arm, you can see that there's a few darker pixels on the edge there. And the reason that is there is to create the sense of texture on the gloves. Now, as I'm painting or shading the hair, I think I'm going off rambling about something, and I think it was politics, oddly enough. So I shade the hair with the wrong light source, and it kind of shows. And then I start adding that outline, and I realize my mistake, and I redraw it. Now, there's also a leather belt that goes around the torso. That is, I think, to hold the sword scabbard, which I didn't create. And at this point, it's just 1 pixel thickness. I think I'm going to increase it to 2. Now it wraps around the chest and it wraps around the breasts, pretty much like the seat belt would. So I have to make sure that it gets that shading. So I put in some extra brighter pixels on those pixels at the center where it goes over the it goes over the breast and the clavicle. as a way to also suggest the volume of that it's wrapping around and that it's not something that is flat or a graphic. As you can see, now I did that shading now. Also adding this belt here, I kind of like the shading on that leather part of the corset. I thought it came out nice, but then I had to cover it up with this belt. So, you know, murder your darlings, like the great Ian McKegg says. So I'm fixing up the shading on the hair a little bit more. And the hair is also something that I fix later on because I think it's too small in this case. And by increasing the hair, I increase the effect of a cartoon silhouette or a cartoon proportions. Because right now the head is okay, except the face is too big. That's the problem. But once I increase the hair, then the whole head becomes big and it's more acceptable because it's almost like a style statement. Now I'm looking at an image of the sword online at this point because I want to make a sword that looks kind of like the character. And I realized that it has a little bit more shape than I wanted it, that I hoped it would. So I have to create a 5-pixel wide blade so that I have room to do this effect of tapering and adding that cut in the center, which was more than I wanted to do because I think that a sword, once you start adding angles to it in pixel art, kind of starts looking like stairs, and it doesn't really help to sell the idea of a sort of a sharp blade. There is. In this case, I'm also doing the shadow. The shadow is basically a black shape, and then I add a few pixels around with transparency. And adding a few more extra shading. And so this is the image how it ended up after those extra 20 minutes. So you can see that I added a bit more things. You can see like the hair is a lot bigger around the whole head. And overall, I think it came out fairly nice. I would change a few things if I had to do it again. I think it's in some parts it is extremely overworked, like too much shading, too many colors. But I think it kind of looks like the character. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it. And I'll see you guys. Take care.